welcome back to the Net Gains podcast. Yes, I am in a different area. Yes, I am holding my microphone. Yes, my nose is bulbous today. We are fighting some adversity. I slammed the med ball off my nose at the gym last night. So, yeah, you know what? Today's the last episode. We're going to fight some adversity. And here we go. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, the incomparable Roger Parent. What's going on?
How you doing, brother? I still can't figure out how in the world you could possibly have busted your nose with a med ball. The story you told me, I was like, I don't know how.
It
makes no
is
sense.
a perfect storm of the bounciest med ball of all time on a turf field that was the bounciest turf field of all time. And the one I was doing was med ball slams in front of me where my face comes down. And it's like I just watched the video demo from my trainer. And the one he was using, he like slammed it as hard as he could and the thing didn't bounce. And I just had that in my head, I guess. And so I just chucked it. The ball came up, started bleeding all over the turf. Two guys next to me were like, oh, like anyway.
That's the best.
So they saw the whole thing, and I like kind of like stumbled backwards and was like, oh, that was a tough one. I think I'm gonna start bleeding. And they're like, yeah, you're bleeding.
yeah,
So,
you bleeding.
Yeah. So went to the bathroom, threw some tissues in there, and finished the workout. I changed my med ball slam technique, but even so, I was like doing side slams this time, and it was still bouncing up over my head. So you can just imagine if I'm like bent over forward.
A med ball at all.
I kind of like med balls now. They're nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what's going on with the face.
Nice. Today is the final episode of Net Gains.
Mm-hmm.
Sad. But I think we learned a heck of a lot doing these 19 episodes. Couldn't make it to 20. We just stopped right at 19.
Yeah. I mean, it's been 4.5 months, right? We started February.
Yeah, it's been fun. So we compiled a statistic here. We've had 31,301 views.
Shout out to the one.
Thanks for the extra one. But, 31,301 views. Our average watch time is like 4 or 5 minutes. I think overall, it's not that we're like, oh, it just didn't work. It's just we're both going into the summer. I think we have a better understanding now of how to actually do it, keep it more concise and on target. It just comes down to our ability to invest time into it, put together outlines, make sure we've prepped in advance, and recording every single week in season. So who knows, maybe we'll get back to it at some point. But I also feel like we got out a lot of what we wanted to say.
Yeah, I agree. And we still want to go through some actionable stuff for you guys, is what we always try to do. So we're going to kind of go through a few things that we wish we had done differently, some successes that we had. And I guess we can probably wrap up with some of the major takeaways from the content of the podcast itself. Really just like the few major keys about mental toughness that we think are really the reason why we started doing this in the first place.
Yeah, let's start with the good, and then we'll just end with the bad.
And then a lot of bad. Well, I'll start out with the good real quick. I want to give a shout out to I guess just everybody in our personal network who we reached out to give us a shot, and you made an awesome hype video, and we had a lot of listeners on that first one that really gave us a chance. Special shout out to obviously Garrett and Ivona who helped us out the whole way, but I guess just thanks to everybody that tuned in for the first episode and gave us a chance. And then, we did see it dwindle after the first one, and we kind of saw like chronological. Every episode had less views and less views. So that's like a sign that we obviously should have done something different along the way. But, at least we thank you everyone who gave us a shot.
Yeah, I think there's no problem with admitting that, right? I think those first couple episodes, that's natural, right? Your personal network comes in. And now we're sort of at we've been at a steady state, I would say, for the past 10 episodes, because you have your audience that just continuously listens. And I think it just comes down to the fact that hey, to build this up into something bigger, you would need really, really groundbreaking ideas. You also need to be incredibly engaging and well prepped going into every episode. And I think we look at it and we just say, hey, we have what we wanted to say, which I don't think is very flashy. Like mental toughness in its core is not flashy. But what I am proud of and what I'm happy of is that I think that's what's made us unique and successful, is the fact that we do the boring stuff, watching the film, thinking about the extra stuff. And it's like not flashy inherently. So I think we got out the information that does make people successful. Now, whether they choose to follow that or not is up to them. And I think what makes us successful is that most people aren't willing to continue on and fight through adversity and reframe and be vulnerable. And so I'm proud that we got our message out, even if it wasn't like a viral thing.
Yeah, and it's funny too, because looking at, I think YouTube does this when we look at the analytics section, it would show similar podcasts and similar clips to the shorts we were making, like things that are going viral and how to emulate them. And all of the ones that were similar to us are these like clickbaity, like thumbnails that are like, why women are ruining your life, or like, this is how I became a multimillionaire. And it's like, it's the most like generic BS that doesn't actually mean anything, but gets views and gets clicks. And we never from the start wanted to do anything like that. And we even tested different YouTube shorts and TikTok shorts and clips that were more clickbaity and less clickbaity. And the clickbaity ones always perform better. So, like it's funny because that's not actually providing actionable feedback for most people, but it is the stuff that gets engagement. So, I guess we could have gone that route and we knew that from the start, but we chose not to because we wanted to provide more actionable stuff that's real.
Yeah, I think when we had that one clip, like whatever, that one clip got like 7,000 views and like 30 comments, and we were just like, we don't want this. Like this is like, it was like centered around some political stuff. And it was like, we don't really want to be a political podcast. And so I think it's important to note that, it's interesting how people prioritize certain metrics around followers and subscribers, but I would rather have, whatever we have, a little over 100 subscribers and have them like genuinely enjoy our content than be clickbaity, have 1 million subscribers and just like be worth nothing. Like,
yeah,
I don't know.
One of the best moments is a comment that we got on a YouTube short, and it was, I don't remember what the clip was about, but the comment was, whoa, this is actually useful information. This is way different than my normal feed. And I still remember that comment. It's like, oh, like that's exactly what we're trying to do. So maybe we just didn't get enough of those people to find us, but that was kind of the stuff that we were trying to do.
Well, I think ultimately, like I saw a clip from some Rogan clip the other day that said he basically made podcasts for 4 years before he took off. And like it's extremely saturated market. And that was back when it wasn't saturated, right? It's like you really do gain your audience like one follower and one subscriber at a time. And it's just like a grind, right? Like it really is a grind. And it's like, I think both of us, it's not like we needed income from this or anything like that. We're doing it because we enjoy talking to each other and we're passionate about these subjects.
Yeah. So I guess we can kind of transition that into lessons learned. And I think, one lesson learned was that we put in a ton of effort in the first probably 5 to 8 podcasts with a lot of research, detailed outlines. We were going hard on clips, things like that. And I guess kind of a takeaway is with anything, not just podcasting, but with any endeavor you're trying to achieve, unless you're putting a ton of effort into it and it's, your main thing or something you're putting a lot of time into, it's not going to take off. Because when we got busy and we started doing less outlines and started, just trying to free ball a little more, that's when we started seeing viewership decline as well. So, like Joe Rogan, for example, that's his thing. and he put a ton of effort into it, and now it's the Joe Rogan podcast. So any podcast that takes off, any athlete that becomes a great athlete, CEO, entrepreneur, it's because they're putting max effort into it, and it's a big part of their life.
Yeah, I'm on both sides of this, which is like, part of me says, yes, you need to fully go hard into something. The other part of me says there's also entrepreneurs who make it by failing so fast and cheap that they are able to test 50 ideas and then find one that hits quick, right? So I'd say there's multiple ways to be successful. You can, I feel like with enough grit, passion, and effort, you could be successful at almost anything.
100%.
And you can also be successful by trying 100 things and just finding something that happens to be successful quickly. But I think what it comes down to is like, hey, when do you know when to stop? Like, when do we know when to stop this podcast? I think, generally we felt like our message was out there, what we had sort of intended to create, we created. And then it's just like, when you're going to record a podcast and you're like, I got to record one. Like that's like a clear sign, don't do that to yourself if you're not like super excited to record each one.
Yeah, I think that's one of your best strengths as an entrepreneur is the fail fast and cheap. I mean, that might be your life motto right there. And, you put some money into this, and I think you recognized earlier than I did that something was missing here. And you were ready to pull the plug earlier than I was, and I kind of convinced you to stay on, and we'll try to update and blah, blah, blah. But I think that is an interesting tactic on knowing when to cut bait. And I guess take us through your thought process on that. On at what point you just didn't see traction and you knew like, this probably isn't going to work out with the current iteration of the way we're doing it.
Well, it wasn't that I felt like I wasn't, so like I didn't lead the podcast. Like I created that hype video, and like you and I created some outlines, but I wasn't like, when I run a company, like I run Digital Position or Chief Marketing Dad or the other companies that I have ownership in, I'm like making decisions and I'm saying we're doing this, 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 and this, and I'm delegating tasks out, and I'm really like the leader. Like it's clear that I am like the one that people are answering to, and I am saying we need to be doing this. I'm driving the strategy. I think with NetGains, this has been more of a sort of like 3 or 4 of us kind of just like, hey, what do you guys want to talk about? Like, how do we want to do this? And like, I had some messages I wanted to get out within certain episodes just so that my kids could watch this down the line. But I wasn't like directing the podcast. And I think had I been directing the podcast, I would have said after episode like 2, we are trying to be this hour-long like New Heights type of podcast. We need to pivot immediately because and move into a more niche focused episodes like we've been now, but we've already sort of used up our goodwill in the first 3 or 4 episodes with like all family and friends that then dropped off. And then we've moved into a more stable audience, and now we're shifting too late. And so I think had we had started with 20, 30 minute focused episodes, I think we would have done much better, kind of just being on topic, but still riffing within it.
Yeah, I think that kind of goes back to my point where it's like, this was my third thing with Digital Position and then volleyball. And then this was a third thing for you. This is what your 5th thing with family and then pickleball and job and blah, blah, blah. So, there has to be someone spearheading it that's leading the vision. So, I guess that speaks to, if we would do it again, we would need someone to spearhead the vision, or one of us would have had to do that a little more in depth.
Yeah, I think that's what makes us like strong at the other things that we're successful at too, is like I have been pouring energy into becoming better at pickleball as you have been with volleyball. You can only pour so much energy into so many things at once, right? And this is something that you and I have always had this shared passion for. So it's been great. I mean, these have been very fun every week to do. It's just, I think at a certain point, it was just identifying, hey, we want to continue to put our full energy into these things that we're incredibly passionate about. And anything that sort of detracts from that goal and mission needs to be cut, right? Like right now I could be training and instead I'm recording a podcast. And I think that like that's just your sign to like simplify. Don't get overwhelmed by taking on too much time debt, and simplify when you can. So this podcast is almost like canceling itself because it's like one of the lessons learned out of this final episode is like, it's okay to walk away from things and admit that didn't work out. And that is like part of the lesson, like being okay with that, because now it's going to make me better at the other things that I am putting my energy into.
Yeah, totally agree. So I guess we'll again, this is something we're very passionate about. So I have a few major topics / themes that I just wanted to say are my favorites. You probably have some on your end. And it's funny, kind of like, I think you and I both would go back to our roots of mindset stuff in every episode. So like, it's all so interconnected. You know, you could link anything to anything, like imposter syndrome back to narrative forming, which is also about how to, not get to burnout. So I think the biggest one that I found I was always going back to was this self-talk narrative forming piece, because that's one that I always use. I use it daily, and I have found it to be the most powerful piece for me to achieve all these things and be good in multiple areas. It always came back to the self-talk for me.
Yeah, I think narrative forming is so crucial that I think narrative forming is, and that's why we started the podcast with it, is so incredibly important to everything else. Your confidence, adversity, imposter syndrome, like every other topic that we talked about. It's almost like everything is narrative forming. Like, because what we are talking about when we talk about narrative forming is just that we can make mental decisions to see something a certain way. We are changing our own perspective on that thing. So if you realize and can have the confidence that you can change your perspective on anything, you can change like your whole freaking life. A good example, like my mom has been worried about, like, I have a hiatal hernia, and she's like consistently telling me like, you should stop core workouts. And I'm like, no way am I going to stop doing my core workouts. And like at one point that was really frustrating me. And then I'm like, I got to remember that like, this is her child. Like, I am her child and she cares about me so much. And when I think about that differently, I'm then now able to approach her with love, as opposed to like frustration, being like, stop saying this or whatever. And it's just like a narrative reframing in my head of like, what's the narrative and how do I reframe it? And I think that is just like, I use it like just every day, all the time. Like, how can I reframe this negative perception I have right now?
Yeah. Speaking of moms, my mom is walking back and forth and talking to the dog in the background on podcast right now. So shout out to all the moms out there. Jeez. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think a lot of it comes down to what people don't understand, or maybe it's just really hard to do. But your mindset is a choice, and everything that you believe about anything, it comes down to a choice that you're choosing to believe. And even if you have a lot of existing narratives that lead you towards a certain way of thinking, you can slowly change those to believe something different. So I've always found that to be the most powerful just technique, is just identifying, and we talk about the identifying piece so much, but identifying what it is you currently believe, or the narrative that's stopping you, and then changing that to be a better narrative that'll get you where you want to go.
Yeah, and I think another thing is assumptions are so incredibly dangerous.
Yes.
Like, people should really try not to make assumptions if you're unclear. What happens, I see this in the workplace all the time, like, let's say an employer is like cutting costs in some area, or like they terminate an employee. Everyone has this fear of like, am I next? Like, what's happening? Like, is the company okay? And it's like, I think like it's okay to just like ask questions to people and just be like, hey, is everything all right or whatever. Don't assume that everyone's getting fired and laid off, or like the business is doing horribly or whatever. And I saw this just happen at a client company of mine where the leader was reducing some costs of some contractor expenses. I had like 2 or 3 different employees come to me and be like, is everything okay with the business? Is everything okay? And I was like, let me just like have a 3-minute conversation with the CEO. We have a conversation. And he's like, oh no, I'm just like, election season is coming. And like, I sort of feel like the economy is just kind of not great right now. And like, I just felt like, hey, I should just cut any sort of excess right now to just be smart and make sure I'm keeping everybody safe just in case something happens. But he's like, but the business is up like 40%. He's like, I don't know why anybody is like afraid at all. And it's like, yeah, because they're they're like bringing assumptions because they're not getting the transparency they're looking for. So I think along with that reframe, like mentally, I think people make assumptions of what they think someone else is doing or why they're doing it from this state of fear. And it causes like all this tension that doesn't need to exist. If you're just willing to just communicate and say like, hey, I'm feeling a little bit like, is the business okay? Like, it's okay to say that, right? Like you're not going to get fired for that. You know, it's, and you'll get a read by just communicating.
Yeah. We talked about that in our Tough Conversations one, where I think one of our quotes from that was, we both agreed on this. We have never regretted starting and having a tough conversation. Like something.
Never,
yeah. Right? Every time I've had to have one, or at least like just start the process of having a tough conversation, it always opens all these doors into finding out, you know, what actually is going on, not just my perception of what someone else thinks. And that can just lead to such negative thought patterns, and then you can separate from whoever and, you know, just talk about it. Just have the conversation.
Yeah, and I've had people that I've had a tough conversation with, and the result of that tough conversation is like, we should not like be friends anymore or whatever. And then like, and like it ends up being great. Like I have someone in my life who's like conflicting with me or whatever. Let's just say back in the day, and there's a lot of tension and it's frustrating and we can't seem to get along for whatever reason. And then we have that tough conversation. And I learn a lot about that person through the tough conversation that makes me go, you know what? I really don't think that I should continue pursuing this relationship for whatever reason. And then it ends up like, now I'm way happier. Like, so even if it like blows up and that person storms off and whatever, now you know something about that person. And I think it's just like, hey, maybe it's just like my sign to move on from that, or the kick I needed to remove toxicity from my life. And so, yeah, I've never regretted a tough conversation, even if like from the outside looking in, that tough conversation led to a blow up or whatever, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, kind of circling back to the beginning, like all this comes down to nothing flashy. It's hard work, you know, like all this mindset stuff is just hard work. That's not fun. I mean, some of it's kind of fun and you can learn some cool stuff about yourself, but in the end, it's just not flashy. And like, it's not rocket science to say, hey, you should talk about your feelings with people and have tough conversations, but most people just won't put in the work to do it. So, you know, if you've listened to this and realized that there are some places that you can improve your life through mindset or through having a tough conversation or through self-reflection, I mean, that's what we're trying to establish with this pod and with helping people.
Yeah, I had I was playing in a pickleball match. It was really close, and we were kind of playing a king of the court style. And the final game is a match that 9 out of 10 times we win this match based on the level that we're at now, and we lost it. And the guy afterward texts me and goes like, I was really bummed about that last match. And I said, you know, I was bummed for a minute too, but it's all part of the journey, man. Like in 3 months, if we keep training like we do, we're going to win that match 11-3, you know, but you just have to embrace that. Like that's just motivation to get back in the gym. And it's just, even through this podcast, I've gotten better at it from talking about it, where like, I'm just unbothered by so much of that stuff. and I'm not like staying up at night upset. It's just like, oh yeah, it's just like a natural part of the journey. And like, I'm just confident that in 3 months I'm going to be on another level, and then on another level after that, and another level after that, that most of these people aren't willing to do. And I think that it's like, that's what separates us.
And perspective helps that too. You talked about perspective a lot, but what you just described is perspective, where it's you're not thinking about things in such a silo and, oh my God, it's the end of the world. We just lost this match and now I have to work on X, Y, Z, and I don't know if I'll ever be able to do it, and when is this going to come to fruition? But I mean, you just know if you keep doing the right things over and over again and stay consistent with it, you're just going to get better. Like, I know you hate the 1% better every day thing, but I live by that. Just get 1% better every day. Just do one thing, and then shoot, 3 months from now, you're going to be a totally different person.
Yeah. And it can happen so much faster than you think if you stick with it. But like most people will try something literally for a week and give it up and be like, I'm not going to get better at this. And it's
not
like,
us. It took us 4.5 months to give up.
Yeah. Just endless episodes of yapping to each other.
And then endless Slack conversations of, we should do this. Oh, we could do this. Oh, we should change this.
Yeah. I think just picking a lane from the beginning and making it focused was our biggest takeaway. Mm-hmm. But hey, you live and learn. And for my children, I think if my kids ever listen to all these episodes, I think it's important to convey to my children that they are stronger than they ever probably give themselves credit for being.
Roger, that was so sweet.
Yep.
Well, we'll see. When they start listening to this, they might hate you by the time they start listening to these. They still love you at this point. But if they're like 12, 14, 15, 16, they might hate your guts by that point.
I'm in the golden years. The golden years are when your kids are self-sustaining, like my kids can get up, can make their own breakfast, their own cereal, whatever, and they can like get ready, get their clothes on, but they still also want to be with me all the time. Right? So it's like that age from like, it's really from like 3 to 13. It's like that, those golden years before they then like, mom and dad aren't cool anymore.
I don't know. Your kids are different, man. They might always love you. We'll see.
They're good kids, man. I'm very lucky. They're just good kids.
Yeah. So this is it. Last episode. Maybe it'll turn into something else. I will say the feedback that we did get, I think a lot of it was good. And a lot of what we found is that it seemed like you and I had some pretty good chemistry on the mic, but maybe the topics themselves needed to be worked on. So I don't know. Maybe this will turn into something else in the future. We'll see. Who knows?
Yeah.
It was still fun doing it.
So much fun, man. I appreciate you taking the time while world traveling and slamming your face with medicine balls. It has been a great adventure. Mm-hmm. And I will continue to root for you on the beach volleyball court and tear your game to shreds anytime you want to send me film.
Great. I'll take it. I'm rooting for you too. I appreciate you giving me the shot. And, you made a pretty big investment in this pod with buying mics and buying video recording. So I think there's something to be said that when you try to do something, you go all in. And we didn't waste time. We went 4 months and then found out it didn't work. And now we move on. So now we're in the moving on process, which I don't know. Maybe we need another podcast on how to move on. I don't know if I'm ready for that
yet. No, I think we've done a good job of explaining that, having a good perspective on it. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. We take a lot of shots and we have a lot of wins. But if I told you about a pet supply company I started 15 years ago called Pet Kingdom Supply, I also failed miserably at that. It's like, it is what it is, but I've had an amazing run of successes throughout failures. But, I think most people just don't talk about their own failures enough. And the point of this final pod is to be open, vulnerable, and say, hey, it didn't work, everybody, but we've had a great time. That's totally okay. And that's like literally part of the journey. So if more people could just openly be willing to say that didn't work and there's no shame in it and have a different relationship with failure, I think they would find a lot more success as a result.
Yeah, it's such a good call out. I'm still having trouble processing this last piece, but it's starting to, after talking with you, it's starting to make sense that it's like, it's almost like a freeing feeling that you can say you put a lot of effort into something and it just didn't work. It's not like you have regrets going back and saying, I wish I had done this. I wish I had done this. We tried hard and it just didn't work. So, and it's nice to have the analytics too, to just show that. And it's not just a feeling. Maybe that's a good takeaway. Like if you try something, try it full in, have some analytics around it. And if the data says that it's just time to stop, then that's almost a freeing experience just to stop.
Yeah. Plus, I'm just sick of talking to you anyway.
I know. You can say you're sick of Garrett.
No, Garrett's lovely.
Garrett was the only one saving this pod by the end.
The problem was we didn't have Garrett on the pod.
Yeah, maybe.
His attractiveness would have brought in a massive female audience, but would have derailed the whole podcast.
So this is it. How about one last thing? See, I just want to keep doing one last thing with you, and then maybe we'll never end it, and I'll keep it.
I'm literally going. I'm leaving right now.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Hopefully you learned one thing. Hopefully you can take something from this and add it to your life. For now, this is the end of Net Gains, episode 19. El Fiend. Roger, take us out.
Thanks, everybody.
Yo!